Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, and eMenu Choice Point of Sale. Today I want to tell you about one of Trestle's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right-sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top-notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer-focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs. Welcome to Tips from Trestle. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and leadership. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. As a 25-year veteran of the hospitality industry, I've focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living to bring food and hospitality to the front of mind in our industry. Let's bring the innovative and passionate spirit of hospitality to everything that we do, for the residents, families, guests, and employees we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm joined by George Collado, CEO of My Field Audits. As an entrepreneur, George has spent the last 20 years investing in people first and ideas second. He believes one of the most important things in life is to maximize your potential and inspire others to do the same. Over his career, he's invested in and managed several hospitality businesses, including restaurants, bars, and live music venues. He has also launched 3 startups, one in fashion and short film industry, which produced a Doritos Super Bowl contest-winning commercial, and 2 in the technology industry. George has had the privilege of mentoring entrepreneur students at the Marshall School of Business at University of Southern California and serving in leadership roles of several churches. He is a marathoner, fitness enthusiast, and lifelong learner. He believes a strong mind, body, and spirit will help you realize your full potential and wish that for all. George, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me. I think that just made my morning hearing you talk about some of the things that I've done. No wonder I'm so tired.
No, for sure. I definitely know it. I'm glad we were able to connect. We've obviously been talking a lot before, and you've given me some great advice on my entrepreneurial journey. And so obviously, your role with My Field Audits is something that's kind of near and dear to what I do, because there's such a need for I call it the P's and Q, and what you do is the Q part, the quality management, right? And so I'd love you to tell us a little bit about My Field Audits, and then let's get into talking about QA and auditing.
Sure. So really, My Field Audits came out of working, in the hospitality industry and managing several locations, and always wondering, okay, are just the basic checks getting done at our locations when it comes to food safety, health, all of these things. And we would do a lot of things, clipboard, right? And then move it into Excel spreadsheet and then try to track it. And then did somebody do it here at this, at this location or at this location, and then trying to aggregate that data. And just being frustrated with not being able to see everything in one place. Yeah. And so I started working with the team, and we started to developing some software. And from that's where this came out of. And we began to work with large food service management companies And so we worked in different areas of the businesses. And one of the areas where we landed in was senior living. And so we helped one of the groups, which is Compass Group, and we worked with one of their senior living verticals, and we helped them manage about 400 senior living communities with our platform. And that's when we really learned that this was a great space to be able to add value. There was a lot of legacy software there, and there still is today. And so over the last 2 years, we really focused on this industry and building not only for replacing what they have, but kind of walking them into the future of what could be, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, my time, I was with you, right? When I was on the operations side, there was always this need to, we had to create audits and tools and things to be able to, like you said, manage the multiple locations and just understand what the pain points were, not necessarily just from like the corporate oversight, but like how can we get resources to the teams where they need them the most? And it was always a frustration of mine that there was technology out there that needed to be implemented, but we never seemed to be able to find the right one. And I think, what you guys do really is valuable and is going to bring a lot of that to the industry. And so, but what I really want to get into is, kind of I guess the higher level way you guys look at and approach the QA and the auditing process, right? And so I'd love to talk a little bit about how you approach the strategy of it versus the implementation of it, and how that can really help operators be successful.
Yeah, so I think strategy is critical, right? I think oftentimes people get excited and they say, "Hey, we can use software like this or like this," and they're trying to solve their problem that they have right now, that main pain point. But we try to come in and we say we're like a boutique consulting firm with the hybrid approach of the consulting and the technology. And so we really try to understand, what are the business outcomes? What are we trying to do here within this business? And what are some of the pain points that you have today, and where would you like to go? And so once we understand those two things, our team will work with the operations team, let's just say in a senior living community or organization. Mm-hmm. And once we understand those things, then we start to take the existing platform and the technology that we have, and we customize it around those for that business. Oftentimes, we'll bring in best practices from other businesses that we've worked with to fill in some of the gaps. But it's really important to first understand, what are you trying to accomplish and why are you trying to accomplish this? And once you put in that framework between the strategy and then, of course, the technology, it's incredibly powerful because it runs. And we know in this industry, there's been a lot of turnover, right? And so continuity is incredibly important. So having a system like this, doesn't matter who comes in next to replace the next person, the strategy and the framework and the technology is already there.
Yeah. So when you sit down with an operator, right, and you want to start looking at that, what's a good process for them to go through on their end to say, how do we look at the strategy of this assessment? How do we not just do kind of the shotgun approach of, well, this is our problem today, let's solve that. Oh, shoot, now this is a problem. And how to, now, because obviously when you do that, you're going to wind up with this like hodgepodge of a tool that's probably not as effective as if you kind of started from scratch the right way. So what have you seen operators do, and what do you help them do to kind of go through that process of defining the strategy?
Sure. I think it's challenging. It depends on who you're working with within the organization. The key here is to have leadership be involved, right? Sometimes we'll have, maybe like, let's just say an executive director at a community, and they want to do this. And then maybe there's another executive director at another community, they want to do it. And then they're trying to check out these standards, and then they're trying to check out these standards. And it becomes that. And we've run into that in the past. And so we really try to work with leadership and understand, again, what are the things that you're trying to accomplish? And so we try to boil it down to, we call metrics. And so every organization, has their maybe 3 to 5 key metrics. I mean, you can have 15, 20, but you really need to boil this down. An example would be safety, right? Mm-hmm. And so if safety is a metric, from there, we understand and we define, what does safety look like? What are we trying to measure? And then we incorporate that into all the inspections. And then if it's an organization with multiple communities, maybe 10, 15, 50 of them, it's uniform across the board, right?
Yeah.
And again, going back to the example of safety, you could have food safety, you can have environmental safety. And so one of the things that we did in our system was, if you take a look at every inspection, anything that has to do with safety, it's tagged on the back end and it runs back up to that metric. So it could be on different inspections, but it's all going up to one metric. So going back to what you asked was, it's really sitting down with leadership, understanding what they're trying to accomplish, understanding what issues they're having, and again, trying to lead them to where we believe, that they should be going in terms of best practices. And when we're able to do that and standardize that, then they're able to share that with each community. And it's incredibly powerful when it's standardized. That's the board.
Yeah, I can, I having like my set KPIs and being able to see what that looks like across 50, 60 locations. I mean, it's a pretty powerful message. When you think from a strategic standpoint, these locations that are using audits and they're gathering all of this data, right? I mean, you've got thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of data points as you're doing these audits. How should somebody strategically look at that to kind of maintain continuity around their business processes? What have you found to be successful in that way using these tools?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to what are the objectives, and really, that old saying, measure what matters. It's such a fundamental thing. And I think it really starts, again, from the top and all the way through the organization. The fairest thing you can do for anybody that works within the organization is to show them where you want to go, show them where they're at, where that community's at, and then show them how to get there.
Yeah.
And then measure it along the way, because you can't come back every quarter or biannual review or annual review and say, okay, these are all the things that went wrong. It really needs to be an iterative process. And we look at it where it's a daily. There should be daily checks. There should be weekly checks. There should be monthly. There should be quarterly. And these conversations need to be had. And so, again, I think if you understand, if the organization understands what this metric means and how it applies to each level of the organization, whether it's the C-suite, whether it's the regional teams, or whether it's the on-site teams, they all understand that. And it creates great conversations.
Yeah.
And you have this measurement. It's the fairest thing you can do for any organization or anybody working within an organization.
Yeah, when you're talking about the different levels and those daily, weekly, monthly, I always think of it as everybody's looking at everything a little bit different, but because they're looking at everything different, a lot of times that strategic approach of, well, we need to have a number or a percentage or a data point that we all know that tells us it's good, it's great, it's bad, it's poor, whatever. And so that's really hard to do if you're trying to do analog auditing, because it's almost impossible. And so the idea of having multiple layers that all tie back into a number in different ways is really, I think, key. And I think helps with that strategy development like you're talking about.
Well, not even numbers, not just numbers. So numbers is important, but what we try to say is, how are you visualizing your quality assurance? What's your quality assurance story? Because that's what it is. Because when you start to think about this, it's really about creating a culture where everyone owns quality. It's not the quality assurance officer, right? It's not the regional manager that comes in once a quarter. Everyone should own quality. And so how do you create a culture like that? And so part of it is really powerful. It's like, what's the story that you're telling? What story is your community telling? And so with that, we started looking at it and said, okay, we really need to add more visual aspects to our platform. So we added the ability to add photos. That was one of the things. And photos are powerful. When you walk in, it's really hard to argue with a photo that shows you that something is off or wrong, or if something looks really good, right? The other thing we did was we added video to the platform. So, and this really helps with efficiencies. And part of the strategy is, some of the team members get burnt out. you can't have a 100-point question and ask somebody to do that every day or every week.
Right.
And so by adding photos and videos, we condensed some of these inspections down from 100 or 50 to 5.
Yeah.
What are the 5 key things that are important for our community to open today? Go around. I want to see a photo, another photo, a video, photo, video, right? Incredibly powerful. And so just imagine this. You're a regional, you're overseeing 10 communities. You go on Monday, you look on your dashboard and you see everything you need to see about those 10 communities before you have your meetings with your DMs or executive directors. And you see all this information, you see these stories, right? And now you go on to your meeting and there's 11 of you in the room and you can talk about these things. And it's not really, people sometimes think about like, oh, you're always trying to find what's wrong, but it's about finding what's right.
Yeah.
What are the best practices? And then sharing that information. So coming back to what I was saying earlier, where everyone owns quality, I think one of the things where things get dropped is somebody's on the front line and they're doing these inspections and they don't see anything coming from these inspections. So like, why do I really do these? They just kind of go up into the air somewhere. And so that's where having these feedback meetings, sharing that information across communities, and even saying, okay, this is Aaron collected this information, this is what they're doing, this is their story, it inspires others. Really important to visualize quality insurance.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying about the best practices and the highlighting the good things, I think that gets missed a lot in this process in general, right? Because I know when I would talk to my regional teams in the past, and they'd always come back and be like, man, I saw this wrong and this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. I was like, yes, those need to be corrected. You need to document that. I was like, well, what were the 5 things you found that were good? What can they build upon, right?
Yeah.
And that's, you need to have both sides of that, like you said, story to be able to really make an impact and improve the operations. And so it lends me to want to kind of roll into the implementation piece, right? I feel like we kind of started down that road a little bit. And so talk to me a little bit about how a proper audit process and the right tools can help you like develop plans and really take action on what you're finding and what you're seeing.
Sure. So again, going back, and you'll see I'll always take it right back to the top, right? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
Whenever I'm meeting with friends and we're having coffee and we're talking about life, I always ask them this question. I'm like, what do you want? Right. And just based off what they want, then I'm able to give them feedback. I've done some entrepreneurship mentoring. And when I talk to business owners or young business owners that are starting out, even in conversations that we've talked about, it's like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Right. So when I understand what you want, and we do the same thing with our clients, what do you want? And then based on that, we can set that up. So that's the first thing. I think really when you look at it, a base fundamental, inspections and checks, they need to be happening.
Right.
That's it. That's just number one. And then the further you go into, let's just use senior living, assisted living, acute care, then you're highly regulated, right? And so then it's critical. And then you have government bodies like CMS. And this information is really important that you have this documented. So as you go into these layers, it becomes even more important to track this. So number one, do we have standards, and are the standards the same across all of our communities? And where is this central location for standards? How are we housing this? Who's updating this information, right? Do we have the most current information? That's just the bottom line. And then who are the people that are supposed to be doing these checks, and how often are they supposed to be doing these checks? And are they even happening? That's it. That's number one. So we make sure we come in, we work with organizations. Sometimes they'll hand us like a binder and they're like, here, and okay, and that's fine. And we love that. We'll take it and we'll digitize everything for them to have one central location, right?
Yeah.
And now they'll have a point person from their side. And if anything happens in the organization with 1 or 2 clicks, we update it across the board for everybody. We got that. So then now we have that set up. The next thing is, are these checks even happening? And so how do you know this? And so one of the things that we design into our dashboard is a compliance report. You log in, you take a look, you can see however you want to see your business. And so most of our businesses are set up through regions. and then you click on a region, and then it opens up all the locations. And so we can have a client with over 100 locations, and they can look on one dashboard, and they can see across every single community, across all the checks in one shot, if they got done today, if they got done this week, this month, this quarter. Incredibly powerful. So if you're in the C-suite, you can see that. If you're a regional, you see what you need to see. If you are an executive of a community, you see your community. So that is just the basic fundamental, making sure people understand what the expectations are. Are these checks even happening?
Yeah.
And the next level is, and I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Well, yeah, no, because for me, what you're saying makes sense, right? Because we talked about why it's so important to see all of these things, because you got to be able to make plans and adjustments and what are the best practices, and it makes me think about the data you're gathering, right? We're gathering up all of these data points and they all help us make decisions. But I think sometimes what happens when people start looking at auditing is they don't always share the information up and down the way they need to. It's kind of, I feel like there have been times when I've been in
up and down and across and across.
Right. Exactly. Right. It feels like the information will roll up, but then from there, it's like, what happens to the data? Like everybody at the top is understanding what's being done. Like, how is that information now rolling down? Like, what actions are being taken? Who can help who with it? And so I'm curious what you've seen in regard to how important it is for that data to be shared, and maybe some success stories you've seen around that and how they worked out.
Sure. Before I answer that, though, I think there's the other part of just making sure these things get done, right?
Yeah.
And then once they get done, going into what you're saying is, okay, how did we do? What information is coming out? And then how do you share that information, right?
Right.
And so, most of our clients, when we come in, they'll do inspections, and then somebody will send an email, then they'll send some photos, and it's just this fragmented thing around an inspection. And then somebody tries to collect all those inspections, and then they try to create a report, maybe through PowerPoint or something like that. Then they try to, you're talking about like hours of trying to pull this together. Whereas, with a streamlined platform like ours or anybody's, it just needs to be a platform that streamlines it. After you do these inspections, it automatically, as soon as you submit it, it runs all the analytics. It sends everybody what they need to know. Those reports all done for them, right? And so sharing this data to the right stakeholders who need to know this information happens instantaneously, right? They get notified. It gets sent into their inbox. They can go on the dashboard and see this. If it's something critical that's going on, they can get notified immediately. So that's really important. But then, kind of layering in, that's the tech, but the strategy part is, what do you do with that information? And so let's say, again, I'm going to use the regional. They're getting information from communities, right? And they have to share that information up, and they got to share it back down.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important that regional has a quick way to share a snapshot, just the information, because we know the C-suite, they just want to know the facts, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, they don't want to see 10 pages of reports. They want to know the facts. So to quickly send it up there, that gives them more time to work with their individual communities. And this is where, coming back, and next time you visit, I'll give you an example. So what we do is we do like this community health check. It's just the health of just all the metrics.
Yeah.
If the on-site team is doing this check, let's say on a weekly basis, the regional comes in maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis and does the same check, right? And so what happens is the regional, let's just say it's quarterly, they do their check for that day. Then they can see that quarter, all the checks that were done, same questions, by the way, all the checks that were done, they see the way they saw it. And then you start to go side by side. And in life, we know, and especially if you're married or you're in a relationship, communication is key, right? And so oftentimes we're trying to say the same thing, but with a different meaning behind it, right? So first, I think my wife and I, when we first got married, we talked about, like, what's your normal? What's my normal, right? And then we talked about finances. Well, my normal, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm like high risk. I can take my bank balance all the way down, but I'm just still going and I'm trying to build. She's like, my normal is X amount of dollars, never goes below, right?
Yep.
And so we had to calibrate that in our marriage. And so we had a lot of miscommunication between us because we didn't understand what our normals were, right? And once we calibrated that, gosh, the conversations were so much better. So I think for a regional and the on-site teams, when they're both looking at things and then they sit down and they talk about this and they calibrate what's their norm, what it should be, it's incredibly powerful. Because the on-site teams now understand what's expected. They feel seen and heard, which is critical in communication.
Yeah.
And then the regionals feel like, they're actually moving the needle, moving things forward. So there's an example of alignment right there, right?
Yeah. It's that transparency with the information. And like you said, creating those best practices and everybody being on the same page, you talked about everybody seeing across as well, not just up and down. And it made me think about, there are a lot of investor groups and REITs right now that in senior living that want a better picture on what's happening in the operation. We lived through the pandemic and COVID and all of that, and there's a realization from them that, hey, we need to have a better understanding. And so they start asking. I've seen it happen where a regional vice president or someone in the C-suite will get bombarded with question after question after question from those investors about what is going on in the community. Having something like this where somebody's doing those daily checks, those weekly checks, you can simply go in and say, hey, the investors want to know a little bit more about these two things, right? So let's just check it every day. Let's update it every week. And now all of a sudden we've got multitudes of data points for them to look at and say, yeah, no, we're making progress on this, or we're not, but these are the 5 things we're doing to improve that. And so I think what you're talking about with being able to dial in those expectations and create that transparency is so super, super important. So,
well, just really quick to touch on the investor piece. It is true, and there are a lot of groups that are purchasing multiple communities, right? Yeah. And then they have management teams that come in and take over, or they're purchasing with that management team, and I think that's just a point of contention. It's oftentimes it's just a miscommunication. It's, are we looking at the same things in the same way? And so being able, I think you nailed it, being able to share that information readily, right? Just think, you're a private equity group. You're able to log into the dashboard. You're able to see all of your communities, right? So operations team saying, hey, we're doing our checks. Everything looks good. There's nothing wrong. But you're able to log into the platform. You look across 50 communities. 1, checks, are they getting done? Yes, they are. 2, what's the data that's coming out of that? And that's one of the things really important for us to be able to do, is to push that data up. So you're not looking for things, but the system is telling you what you need to look at, right? Yeah. And so you'll be able to see trends. Are things trending up or are they trending down, right? And so for an investment group, just think, if they have access to something like that, it's incredibly powerful, because now we're creating this transparency, right? And when you have transparency in any relationship, again, going back to marriage or whatever is going on, it's incredibly powerful, because then you have, it's all about having that conversation, and just remembering, going back to relationships, it's one of the best things that my wife and I, remind ourselves whenever we're disagreeing on something, is like, hey, we're on the same team. And when we remember that, it's so incredibly powerful, because we're both moving towards the same goal. And when you can create that transparency with your investors, possibly if you are working with a food service operator that's managing your communities, and you create that transparency, or they create that with you, it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. As we kind of come to the end here, I know I can't believe we're already at the end of this, right? I wanted to talk a little bit about, selfishly, consultants like myself, right? One of the things that I do is I work with smaller operators, and I see the value in a tool like this for operators. If you've got 100 locations, this makes a lot of sense, and you've got the team to see it and manage it. And so, from your vantage point, when you work with consultants such as Trestle Hospitality, how do you approach that, and what's the value that you see for those operators to be able to work with that third-party consultant for success?
Sure. I think there's more self-op than anything out there, right? And so, it might be 2 or 3 communities or 5 or whatever it is. And I think where they have a hard time, competing when it comes to technology. They don't have a multi-million-dollar tech budget, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the advantages by, working with a consultant or working with us directly. You get this multi-million-dollar platform that the big players are using, and you get that today, right?
Yeah.
And you're able to apply that as you grow your business without all the overhead costs and, keeping engineers on and whatnot. So that's incredibly powerful for the self-ops. We bring you that today. And it's a direct impact. That's the thing. This is not something you're looking at 6 months. You're looking at right away, things start to change. Because, again, you're setting expectations, right? And people understand what expectations are. It's really powerful. And then with consultants, it's incredibly important for a consultant, and I don't have to tell you this, but to be able to have the right tools to be able to do their job. And so in your case, let's just say it just maximizes what you're already doing. And so, when you come into an operator and you're bringing them new technology to make their business more efficient and improve, all kinds of areas. But what we do when we work with consultants, which we think is incredibly powerful, is we layer you into the technology, right? Your philosophy, Trestle, philosophy into the tech. And so I'm sure there's a lot of clients that would love to have you on full time, right? You get expensive to have you there all the time, right? So
true.
This is a way to be able to have you involved, maybe as a fractional quality assurance person. So they can afford that. They get your expertise. And then for you, you're able to serve way more clients because now you're extending yourself through the technology. So it's not just you on site, working with them. So we see we have about I'd say almost 24 partnerships, and we've seen that it works incredibly well for the consultants and for the clients that they're serving.
Yeah, for me, when I think about that, right, and how Trestle helps and supports the clients, that transparency, but also being able to create a book of best practices. Like these are the things that, yes, you're doing really well, but there's some operators that I'm working with over here that do good things. And how can I help you? How can I support you being the best you can be? Because if you've got 3 locations or 5 locations, you're going up against those competitors that have 80, 100, 60.
Yeah. And whatever. don't reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Don't let me bring this into you and when we can shortcut this so quick with these best practices. So when you have a great consultant that you're working with, it's incredibly powerful. And I know at times for clients, it might seem expensive of what that is, but when you think about the overall cost over time and shortcutting that, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So definitely a significant just package that can help them in the long run. So George, this has been great. I mean, the insight and kind of the thinking and the process around it, obviously there's a reason we're working together. And so I appreciate all of that. How can the listeners learn more about what you're doing and My Field Audits, and you kind of just get in touch with you if they have questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. So one is you can go to our website, myfieldaudits.com. We have all kinds of information there. We have different videos. You can check us out on LinkedIn. We have videos posted there. But one of the best ways I think that we found is through our consultant partners, right? They're already working with us. They bring the best practices. In most of the time, they're already working with a consultant. So it's just an easy transition to do that. But those are probably the best ways to get connected with us.
Perfect. Well, George, I appreciate all your time today and all this great information, and thanks for joining us on Tips from Trestle.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.